Hey folks, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered. On today's show, voting rights for formerly incarcerated, two huge initiatives, one in Louisiana, one in Florida. We'll talk to Carmen Perez, one of the co-organizers of the Women's March, about this critical issue. Also, it is 2 weeks until Election Day, and voter suppression is rampant all across this country. This time was happening in Waller County, Texas, where they are targeting Black and Latino students at Prairie View A&M University. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund filed a lawsuit this morning. We'll explain to you exactly what it is about. Also, two court decisions actually protecting the right to vote in Missouri and New Hampshire. We have the details. Brian Kemp, Republican running against Stacey Abrams in Georgia. They'll be debating in about an hour, caught on tape worrying about people actually voting. You're the Secretary of State, dude. You should kind of want that. We have the audio. Can't wait to discuss with our panel. Meanwhile, in Georgia, an old story about and photo surfaced about Abrams burning the Georgia state flag in 1992, the Confederate racist one. We'll explain. Also, if the Democrats have a good election day in 2 weeks, they can thank Black female voters and Black female candidates. The electoral power of Black women is big, and we'll break it down with a university professor. And also, Megyn Kelly is apologizing after today, saying, I don't see what the big deal is about blackface. She learned real quick how social media felt. We'll read to you her apology. Also, Niecy Nash has just put out a helpful PSA for all the white women who losing their damn minds calling the cops on Black people. Trust me, you're going to get a kick out of this one as well. And yes, the racists in Florida have issued a racist robocall against Andrew Gillum. Boy, they don't want to see a Black man become governor. And Donald Trump last night said, I'm a nationalist. He left out the white part. But we are not a fool. Our panel will break that down as well. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it.
Yes, that is live.
Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
Election Day is 2 weeks away, and of course, there's an effort to get as many people voting as possible. But those who are formerly incarcerated, numbering some 6 million, will not be able to vote, not because they don't have the proper ID, but again, because they were in prison. They've been convicted of a crime, and even though they have served their time, they still are not allowed to vote. And the community this most impacts, African Americans. Black folks are 4 times more likely to lose their voting rights than any other race. We're talking about restoring voting rights to returning citizens. There are a couple of initiatives happening, one in Louisiana and one in Florida. Well, this is critically important. That could be a game changer in future elections. Joining us right now is Carmen Perez, Executive Director for the Gathering for Justice, also co-organizer of the Women's March. Carmen, this is one of those issues that, again, people say, oh, this isn't right, it isn't fair, but the reality is both political parties, Republicans and Democrats, have 2 separate views on this issue.
That's right. So we know that many people who have felony convictions don't have the right to vote. So it's not just people who are coming out of prison like yesterday. We're talking about people who have done their time. They have served their time. They are now community members. They're contributing to the community. And so in Florida, there are 1.5 million people with a felony conviction. And so Desmond Meade is working on voting restoration rights. And so this is going to be a huge game changer. It's something that we all need to get behind. But there are both Republicans and Democrats that are in agreement that people deserve the right to vote in Florida.
And not only that, you also, of course, you have an initiative that's been going through the legislature in Louisiana, also dealing with this as well. And again, we are seeing people who recognize that it makes no sense whatsoever denying the right to vote of people who served their time, some of them 20, 30, 40 years ago.
That's right. We just finished a concert here in California this weekend called Time Done. It's to launch a new campaign for those who have served their time. They've done their time. It's been 20, 10, 5 years. And so we believe that it's important, though there are 70 million people with felony convictions, and there are 40,000 barriers, legal barriers for those folks who cannot get a job, housing restrictions, voting restrictions. To what you're saying, it's so important for people to understand that this affects so many people, not only those that have served their time or who have never done time inside prison, because people have felony convictions without serving time, but also their families. My husband is somebody who has served their time. He was convicted of something when he was 19 years old. He is somebody, and my family cannot adopt anyone, right? So he is somebody who is working on this. Desmond Meade, Louisiana has this whole voting restoration rights. It's going to be huge for our country. But we also know that there are individuals that are putting voter suppression laws into place, and we got to fight back, especially with the midterm elections.
Henry, go to my iPad, please. This is from nonprofitvote.org. What you'll see is that voting rights retained while in prison for a felony conviction. Only 2 states, just 2 states, Maine and Vermont. Voting rights restored automatically upon release from prison. D.C., Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Utah. Voting rights restored automatically once released from prison and discharged from parole. California, Colorado, Connecticut, and New York. And then, of course, you have these other states, but there are a number of states where literally voting rights restoration is dependent on the type of conviction and the outcome of an individual petition or application to the government. Alabama, Delaware, Mississippi, Nevada, Tennessee, and Wyoming. And this is the huge one. Voting rights can only be restored through an individual petition or application to the government in Florida, Iowa, and Kentucky. And Carmen, that's why the Florida voting initiative is so important, because they're trying to change the state constitution. Once that's done, 1.5 to 1.6 million will have their voting rights stored, but not just their voting rights. You mentioned Desmond Meade, who is leading this. He came out of prison, got his law degree, but Florida does not even allow those who are formerly incarcerated with a felony to get a professional license. And so he got his law degree, but he can't practice law as a result of the law in Florida.
And those are the legal barriers that I'm talking about. 70 million people who have done their time, have a conviction, and face 40,000 legal barriers. In California, there are about 8 million people who face 5,000 barriers. That is the population of New York City. As of 2015, 6.1 million people in the U.S. have lost their right to vote due to a felony conviction. 1 in 4 of those are still in prison. So these are people who have come out, like Desmond Meade. He's changed his life. He got a degree. He's contributing to society. He's working to make sure that nobody is facing the barriers that he is facing. And it's going to be huge in Florida.
And again, this is one of those issues that when you look at the polling data, first of all, it's polling about 72% in Florida, but it's a huge discrepancy. About 58, 59% of Republicans, 80+% of Democrats. So you clearly have a difference of view when it comes to party.
That's right.
Well, look, I think it's going to be a huge, huge thing that if they're able to get this passed in Florida. And here's the key, folks. It must pass by at least 60% in Florida. It can't be simple majority. If it gets 60% or more, it passes, it changes the state constitution, and then they'll have the right to vote. That's going to be a major, major victory, and it could change elections in Florida when it comes to the legislature, but also congressional races, senatorial races, and gubernatorial races, and could have a huge impact on the 2020 election. And so trust me, if a Donald Trump goes to Florida talking Mr. Law and Order, this could very well sink his chances of winning Florida in 2020.
And those who don't have the right to vote have family members who do have the right to vote. So people need to go out and vote. This is huge for us. These midterm elections are going to be huge for so many of us that are impacted by so many of these issues. And so I really, 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 really urge all of you to go out and vote.
All right, Carmen Perez, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, I want to go to our panel right now. Nick Rathod, Vice President of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, Progressive Action. How you doing? Good. Lauren Victoria Burke, writer for the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and also Malik Abdul, National Communications Director for the Black Conservative Federation. Folks, when you look at what is happening, what's happening, of course, in Louisiana when that bill was passed, affecting some 2,000 people. But again, this in Florida, first and foremost, this is a ballot initiative being led by African Americans, okay, in Florida. Again, 1.5 to 1.6. I'm telling you right now, if you're running for office in Florida and you're talking about, I want to get tough on law and order, you're going to have to recalibrate if all of a sudden 1.5 to 1.6 million people are not going to be voting in your state.
It is interesting to think about the 60% threshold. That's hard to reach. That's really hard to reach. But the good news in Florida is they have two really exciting races. They have the, Rick Scott and Bill Nelson running against each other, and obviously Andrew Gillum. Andrew Gillum should bring out the type of constituency that really would care about that particular ballot initiative. I actually think it'll make the 60%, which in another year I don't think it would make the 60%.
Well, look, they've been polling very well over the last 3 or 4 months. Live on this show, when we got the most recent data, it showed about 72% is where it's polling right now, because it's a lot of white folks in Florida who are felons or formerly incarcerated who are looking to also get the right to vote. Malik, I'm telling you, if you're Republicans and conservatives in Florida, you're going to have to change what you say, because it used to be, law and order, lock them up. You got 1.6 million folks now who are going to have a ballot in their hand. I think that's going to change. That's going to change the tone of a lot of campaigns.
Yeah, I think they can make some changes to the rhetoric, but I think overall I support what the ballot initiative down in Florida. I think the Republican Party as a whole, especially when you're talking about people who have served their time, I think that the Republican Party as a whole benefits from encouraging legislators. Fortunately, Florida is one of the few states that allows that what they have there in Florida, but I'm glad to know that a lot of the Republicans in many of, if not most of the other Republican states don't have those same issues as in Florida. But as far as this ballot initiative, I'm all for it.
But Nick, look, the reality is in Florida, what they have is a joke of a system where Rick Scott, who's the governor, appointed several commissioners where you had to actually physically go before them to explain why you should get your right to vote back. And then one of the individuals on it would ask every person, do you go to church? And they would be going like, well, what the hell they got to do to get my right to vote back? Wow. And they very rarely said yes. I mean, one guy who had no issues for 20 plus years laid this whole deal out, and they were like, you've done a good job of staying clean, but no, we're not going to give you a right to vote. And so what this measure does, wipes that commission out, where you will have that right to vote as soon as you get out.
Well, first, I mean, this is a modern-day Jim Crow that's happening down in the South and across the country. I mean, you saw on your iPad, it was 2 states that allowed felony reenfranchisement, and there's 48 that have some form of it, but most of them don't. And that is troubling. And this, to me, is the type of game-changing thing that we need to be doing as Democrats, as a progressive movement, as people of color, because, like you said, 1.6 million people coming out. That changes the entire dynamic in that state. And in every state that we can get that passed in and moved in, I think, only speaks to then further challenges for the Republican Party and benefiting the progressive movement and especially black and brown.
Lauren, this is also going to be a lesson, frankly, for progressives and Democrats when it comes to ballot initiatives. Conservatives have always funded these initiatives, gotten certain things passed, constitutions changed. You look at Alicia Reese, Ohio State rep. She's been desperately trying to get progressives and Democrats to fund her Ohio Bill of Rights initiative that would guarantee the right to vote in the Ohio State Constitution. Every damn year, they are suing somebody and going to court over voting in Ohio. If you change the Constitution and you actually make it a part of the Constitution, game over. You can get, because what people don't understand is there is no affirmative right to vote for every American. Justice Antonin Scalia wrote that in Bush v. Gore in 2000, that there is no affirmative right to vote. It does say if you're a minority or a woman, your rights cannot be discriminated against, but there's no affirmative right to vote. By putting it in the state constitution, then you get rid of all these ridiculous, we're going to changing of polling locations and stripping this and all these things that, frankly, Republicans use to suppress the vote. This now changes it. So I think The lesson for progressives will be, whoa, this thing passes. Now, let's stop sitting here waiting for a progressive Supreme Court or a federal bench change the state constitution.
It's so hard, though, on the left to fund so much of what needs to be funded. I mean, we spend so much time.
Well, they can fund stupid stuff.
Well, we do fund stupid, but the thing is that we have to spend so much time just protecting the franchise, protecting the vote. You know, just on a basic level. You see what's going on right now with voter protection. So much energy has to go into voter protection. So many attorneys have to work on that.
Yes.
That the ballot initiative piece has been missed. It's been missed over the years. I mean, let's face it. But, you know, if you get the right governor in there in Florida, that'll be a big help as well.
But here's the piece, though. I'm going to go to you. 2011, the Ohio legislature passes this onerous voter ID law, voter suppression bill.
Right.
They get more than 400,000 signatures to put it on the ballot in 2012. All you needed was 330,000. They got way over that.
Right.
What happens? The legislature goes, oh, hell no. We are not going to have all these folks motivated to turn out.
Right.
Here's the deal. White folks will vote for an affirmative right to vote in the Constitution.
Exactly.
They changed that law, and they said we are not turning those people out because, and it was still on the ballot, but they did not want it to happen. In Maine, Republican legislature took away the right to same-day voter registration. The residents in 2010, Maine residents said, who the hell asked y'all to do that?
Right.
Put it back on the ballot in 2012.
Right.
It passed by more than 65%.
Right.
The point here is, I think that when you have these ballot initiatives when it comes to voting, you can thwart Republicans because I just don't see a white Republican going, damn it, I'm going to vote against, have my right to vote.
Well, anytime you have an issue like that, particularly like that, the ones you just mentioned, that galvanizes that many people, you've got it. I mean, we live in a country with 70 million people who have a criminal record.
Right.
So, you know, when you have that many people who have a criminal record, obviously we're specifically talking about felonies, but still, that's a lot of people who understand involvement with the criminal justice system, and they're going to be for something like, because there's really no reason, once you've paid your debt to society, there's really no reason that you shouldn't be able to re-enter.
Nick, final comment.
Well, this is a matter of the wrong priorities, I think, for the progressive movement and the party. We continue to focus federally, and where we actually need to be focused is at the state level.
What Republicans have done. Focus on state.
For 40 years, they've been building at the state level, which is why currently they have historic control of the governorships, historic control of attorneys general, historic control of state legislatures, and if we don't control those things, we lose everything. So ballot initiatives, invest in those. They turn people out. They're a way to get people to the polls. But in the legislatures as well, invest in there. You won't have these issues happening if we invest in the right places, do the right things, and structurally change how we operate.
All right, folks, in the home stretch of the midterms, the Republican Party, their leader Donald Trump, have decided that these 2 weeks will all be about the fear of immigrants, racism, and bald-faced lies about a left-wing mob. Well, Trump used all of that to win the presidency, and he is trying it again. Now, last night, he said he was a nationalist. Now, of course, he left out the word white, but no one is confused by what he meant. We'll deal with that later in the show, but one more instance of voter suppression is being called out by the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at Prairie View A&M University, an HBCU in Waller County, Texas. There are no early voting sites on the campus, all by design, folks. This has been an issue dating back more than 2 decades. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, they says, quote, since at least the early 1970s, Waller County has consistently tried to limit the political power of black voters in the city of Prairie View and at Prairie View A&M specifically by undermining their right to vote. In keeping with this troubling pattern, Waller County officials have refused to come close to providing the same number of early voting opportunities as they have to non-black and non-student voters before next month's election. LDF is hopeful that the court will order Waller County to fulfill its obligation to protect every voter's rights under the Voting Rights Act and the U.S. Constitution. Also, we'll be watching in this case as we're looking at 2 more in Georgia. In Missouri, there was some movement to preserve the right to vote. Voters with alternate ID will not be required to provide a sworn statement about their residence in Missouri. Voting rights advocates said the sworn statement requirement had a chilling effect on voters. In New Hampshire, in a major victory for student voting rights, a state court struck down a restrictive voter registration law aimed at college students. To back to our panel, bottom line is this here. You go about the Prairie View and Waller County. Waller County, largely white. They do not want those black students affecting the politics in that county. It is nonsensical to not put an early voting location on that campus, but it's the exact same thing we saw in 2016, where you had a county clerk in Wisconsin who said she removed an early voting site from a college campus, she said, because too many of these young students are voting Democrat. And so she moved it to some way out place in Wisconsin with a very small parking lot off of that college campus. Malik, these are the type of activities that Republicans use to shrink the electorate.
I don't agree with that, just like I don't agree with the opposition to the ballot initiative in Florida.
You don't agree with what I said or what they're doing?
Yeah, I don't agree with what they're doing. I don't agree with voter suppression efforts just as a whole. I think that we should, whether it's restoring rights to former incarcerated individuals or anything like what we're talking about, students being able to vote at a college. I don't agree with any of those efforts. You know, there are things that happen where you have these ballot initiatives. I'm fully supportive of them. We just had a ballot initiative here in D.C. I think it was referendum 777, where the voters here in D.C. voted for this initiative. I think it was a tip wage initiative or something like that. And just recently, just like that, the city council overruled it. So I generally disagree with any of those type of efforts to deny or overrule the will of the voter.
The bottom line is, Dick, this is what the Republican Party does. State after state after state after state.
So we need to change the dynamic again, back to what I was saying. We need to have the right people in power in those places, which is why it's important to vote. But secondly, we need to defend the right to vote as Democrats in the same way that the Republicans defend the right to bear arms in the Second Amendment. There should be no questions. We should be screaming from the rafters that this stuff is happening in Georgia and Florida and Texas. That it is unconscionable to me that in the greatest democracy on earth that these shenanigans are happening and we sit back and allow it.
And not only that, it's boringly consistent. The Republicans go after this over and over, time and time again. It's the same thing. They understand the demographics in the country are changing, and they're making moves to try to keep even, and they can't keep even. At some point, you get overtaken. We'll see in 14 days whether or not that'll happen in Florida and Georgia and Texas. I doubt it'll happen in Texas because there's so many complications with regard to certain constituencies that are, you know, made like this, making it more hard for them to vote. But Georgia and Florida, we may see a realignment for Team Blue. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to at least distinguish what's happening in, for instance, Texas with the students being able to vote at Prairie View and what's happening in Georgia with this voters, the 52,000 voters who can vote, but they have to, what is that, the exact match law that they're doing down there on the floor? Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to distinguish what's happening there from what's happening in Texas.
But actually, what previously happened in Texas, that 5 different federal judges said that the Texas voter ID law was discriminatory. The Obama administration sided with the plaintiffs in that. The Trump administration comes in, they sided with the state of Texas. It went to the Republican Supreme Court, and then they sided with Texas on that. But again,
and let's be real.
They said some 600,000 folks in Texas disenfranchised by that voting ID law.
Right, and voter suppression is now effectively the policy of the Republican Party. I mean, this is what they believe.
Based on what?
No. It is based on
an opinion.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Hold on. Malik, I can do a roll call.
All right.
You want to hit a roll call?
Let's do the roll call.
Iowa, Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Texas, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. You want me to keep going?
Well, and
it got worse and started right after Barack Obama got elected.
And again, you're including Georgia in that, and Georgia is probably one of the other states where what we have in Georgia is that exact match law.
No. Let me help you out. Here's what happened in Georgia.
Yes.
You had the exact match games that were going on.
Yes, under Kemp.
A federal judge, ruled against Kemp, said this is not right, not proper.
And then the legislature.
What do Republicans in Georgia do? What the hell? We're going to make it the law.
Yeah.
Okay. So then they actually made it the law. So you had that going. That's voter suppression. In Tennessee, same thing. Black Voter Project turns in some 36,000 registrations. They say, a number of these are invalid. Won't tell them what makes them invalid. They're just saying they're invalid.
But that's not what happened in Georgia.
Wait a minute, hold up. In Missouri, the Secretary of State in Missouri, Republican, releases a video as saying, you got to have this ID to vote. A federal judge goes, no, you don't, smacks him down. Kansas, Chris Kobach Kobach pulled all of his games and tried it on a national level. It got thrown out. 2012, the leading Republican in Pennsylvania says Mitt Romney is going to win Pennsylvania because of voter ID. In Alabama, Republicans shutting down driver's license offices in that particular place. Florida, I've already laid the whole thing out. I can go Arkansas, Texas, Republican, Governor Greg Abbott, 5 different federal judges there. Do you need any more examples?
No, but I still don't think that.
I ain't done yet. North Carolina, where the Republicans in North Carolina, where the federal judge said they had a laser-like targeting of black voters. They shut down early voting locations.
Yeah, I remember that.
They ended voting on Sunday.
I remember.
I just gave you a dozen states led by Republicans where they have enacted voter suppression. I have not heard Roland McDaniel, the GOP chairwoman, say a word. I have not heard Donald Trump, president, Republican, say a word. I have not heard Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, Republican, say a word. I have not heard Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, say a word. I have not heard Republicans, black Republicans, as a group, other than Colin Powell, stand up and call out voter suppression. That's your evidence.
Well, I mean, you can mention Colin Powell, and you can mention some of the other ones, but those particular states that you're talking about, I don't know the details of each of those, but I just gave them to you. But you're talking about, and I think what you mentioned is that this is the play of the Republican Party.
Which it is.
That's your opinion.
No, but it's not a fact.
Well, that's just your opinion.
I just gave you.
Yes, you gave me instances. You gave me instances
in America. I just gave you at least 12. I can go find you.
But that's not.
Why is it hard to admit? Why is it hard to admit?
Because it's not. Because I don't believe it's true.
Name a Democrat who believes in voter suppression.
Name a
Democrat who is done what Chris Kobach has done.
I don't even.
Name one Democrat that's done what Chris Kobach has done.
You're saying name a Democrat who.
Name one Democrat. Name Democrat.
But you're giving your opinion.
I can name Brian Kemp.
You can say Brian Kemp.
Brian Kemp and Chris Kobach is not my.
But that's your opinion on Brian Kemp.
I'm helping you with one more.
But that's your.
No, I'm helping you one more. Conservative group right here in Virginia, a legal group. They were sending notices to very small towns in Mississippi saying, oh, these voting rolls where names don't match. If you don't remove them from the voting rolls, we're going to sue you. These small towns did not have the money to hire outside attorneys, and so they actually began to purge their rolls because of what they actually did. Speaking of purging rolls, Republicans in Ohio actually led the whole purging of voting rolls initiative. White man in Ohio sues them, go to the Supreme Court. How does the Republican-controlled Supreme Court rule? Yes, purging is allowed. Dude, that's policy. And again, the Republican Party says nothing. In every single instance I just mentioned, the Republican Party has never sided with the people voting. No. They've never sided with the people who were fighting against it. So you keep saying that's not the party's position. Malik, please show me, and I will wait for it, how Republicans never side with folks who are trying to vote. I just told you in Maine.
So speaking
the Republican legislature, the Republican legislature and the Republican governor changed the state law.
Right.
Didn't ask nobody. When it came to same-day voter registration,
the
voters went, what the hell are y'all doing, and overruled them
as they should
again.
have. As they should have.
But please show me.
You can take the what's the Georgia governor now? I mean the Georgia governor. What he did after the hurricanes, the storm damage that was down there. What he did, he extended early voting in I think several of the counties in Georgia. That's what the Republican Party is. That doesn't mean that there aren't places where there may be some voter suppression, but that's not a policy of the entire party. It's just not a policy of the entire party. It's just not.
Last chance. This is the last chance you have. This is so like this is like a preacher trying to give your life to Jesus. I just need you, Malik. Please show me an example where Republican state officials, party officials, where Republican governors or leaders, where they have stood up and said, what our party is doing is wrong and shaving votes off and suppressing the vote. We're going to stand with those who filed the lawsuits. Can you give me an example?
Let me look at Jeff
One.
Flake's Twitter account. He may have said somebody like Jeff Flake.
ain't
Yeah,
said
but
a
of
damn
course he
thing.
hadn't
You
said
know
it.
what?
But of course
Jeff
he
Flake
hadn't
good
said
at
it.
saying stuff
Yeah.
but doing nothing.
Yeah.
Because in
Yeah.
Texas we call that all hat and no cap.
So I don't have an example of
You
that.
don't have an example.
I don't
Because
have an
Malik,
example of
guess
that.
what? They don't
What's
exist,
that?
bro. They don't exist. You can't find them because they don't exist.
They may not have said anything,
ain't never
but
said
that's not a policy of the Republican Party.
Here you go, Doc. October 26th voting deadline is in Nebraska. October 29th, state of Washington. October 30th is Utah and Connecticut. And of course, on election day, you can actually register and vote. Colorado, D.C., Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Maine, because they overruled Republicans, Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, Vermont, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. Those states you can actually register and vote on the same day. Now, these are the states that are early voting taking place as we speak. Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, North Carolina, and Ohio. Those are all the places where you can vote right now. Now, we're talking about how Republicans are concerned about all these folks voting. Well, speaking of Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State in Georgia, running for governor against Stacey Abrams, he has been very concerned about those folks. A reporter for Rolling Stone obtained a copy of this audio that took place on Friday, where Kemp very worried about those folks voting.
And as worried as we were going into the start of early voting with the literally tens of millions of dollars that they are putting behind to get out the vote efforts for their base, a lot of that with absentee ballot requests. They have just an unprecedented number of that, which is something that continues to concern us, especially if everybody uses and exercises their right to vote, which they absolutely can, and mails those ballots in. We got to have heavy turnout to offset that.
He is really concerned about them turning out, but he's doing all he can to make sure it doesn't happen. Now, in less than 30 minutes, of course, Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp will be engaged in their first debate that's going to be airing on Georgia Public Broadcasting. If you go to RolandSMartin.com and RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, we're going to have the debate on our website as well. Now, yesterday, though, the New York Times reported that Stacey Abrams, as a college student, participated in a demonstration where she burned the then Georgia state flag. Now, of course, that was the Confederate flag in Georgia. Of course, this was a story from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in 1992. AUC students burned state flag in protest at Capitol. Now, here's what the flag looked like back then. We're going to show you the flag. Guess what? That damn thing was worth getting burned. Now, of course, stories coming out right now. Brian Kemp is hoping that's going to revive some feelings among Republicans there in Georgia as it relates to that. To me, non-story, because I set that sucker on fire today.
Well, the problem is if you care about that issue and that's your wedge issue, you were voting for Brian Kemp anyway.
Right.
So I don't understand why. What I think it really shows is the Oppo research against Ms. Abrams is non-existent or weak or something, because if that's all they've got a huge problem. I mean, in 1992, when she was a Spelman, why would anyone care about that? Per
Well, we
se?
care what
You care
Kavanaugh
about-
said. We care what Kavanaugh said in his yearbook.
So flags and Kavanaugh.
But that's a false equivalency.
it's
We
a
care
false,
about what he said.
Nick,
It's a
go
false.
ahead.
It's a
Nick, go
false.
ahead.
That's a false equivalency.
But is it though?
Nick, go
Because
ahead.
Yes, because so what happened with Kavanaugh? He committed an actual crime.
Did he?
Yes,
What crime?
he was accused of a crime.
Okay, accused
He was
of a crime.
accused of a
Right.
crime.
There's a
okay?
difference.
And they had a witness, they had evidence, they had
Uncorroborated.
a whole lot of things going on there, and it was a crime that needed to be explored. Her right to protest is protected by the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a crime. And to Roland's point, the Confederate flag, I would be participating right now in burning that thing. And I think a lot of people, the actual issue here is that this is just a distraction to what Brian Kemp is actually doing down there, suppressing votes and suppressing black people from coming out and trying to, again, dog whistle to get white people to come out and vote.
Well, personally, I don't have a problem with her protest. I don't agree with it. It's not something I would have done. I wouldn't have burnt the flag in the same way I don't kneel for the anthem.
But you got a problem with, but do you have a problem with that Confederate flag?
Well, I'm from Mississippi, so our state flag actually has the Confederate
You got a
symbol
problem with that
in
flag?
our sack. No, I don't.
You don't have a problem with the Confederate emblem being in the Mississippi?
I grew up in
flag?
Mississippi all of my life, and none of my friends, none of my family, none of any of the black people I know from Mississippi protested our state's flag.
No, that's not what I asked you. What I'm asking you again is,
I personally
do you have a?
I'm personally not offended by it.
You telling me you don't have a problem with the Confederate emblem being on the state flag? So you have no problem that black children are growing up in Mississippi having to salute a flag with the Confederate symbol?
As that kid who grew up in Mississippi, no, I don't. It didn't bother me when I was.
And the Republican governor of that state had a problem with it.
That's fine.
Of South Carolina.
Hold on. Let me go back. You are a black man in Mississippi.
Black man.
You have no problem.
Black man from the hood in
You
Mississippi.
have no problem with a Confederate symbol being on the Mississippi state flag.
It did not bother me then, and it does not bother me now.
So you will salute that flag.
I don't salute Mississippi's flag. I live in D.C. I don't really salute any flag.
Okay. Do you ever go back home for events? Mm-hmm. And when they say stand up, you salute it.
I've never been to an event where we've had to stand up there. I was just there for my niece's graduation.
But you got no problem with it?
It doesn't bother me. If they decided to remove it, it's fine. But I'm pretty indifferent to it. It's not as that kid, and probably the only one on the panel who grew up in Mississippi, I can say that I don't know of the flag being a problem when I grew up. And this is just
actually,
a fact.
I can show you a lot of black folks who would disagree with that. I mean, I know.
Well, I'm the Mississippian.
I know for a fact. No, that's fine. But I know Angelou Ellis was also a native of Mississippi.
Yeah, I'm not
has been
familiar
one of
with
the
her.
folks who has been leading protests against that flag. But again, no. But it's always one or two who had that feeling. But I can tell you right now, when you have folks who still believe that the Confederacy should have won,
that's a problem.
But you mean that's a problem?
Yeah, that's a problem.
But that's not what the damn thing is still on the flag.
Well, I mean, you're saying whether or not.
And you also know in your home state when you go to Statuary Hall that the two statues from your state are Confederate generals.
Are you kidding me? And in fact, we have a Confederate memorial in front of, I think, our old city,
And are you
our
cool
old
with that?
Capitol Hall. I was actually amazed by it because I never knew it was there.
But you cool with that?
If they remove it, fine. If they don't.
Are you cool that the senior senator of Mississippi uses the desk of Jefferson Davis, the greatest traitor in American history?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's not like Robert Byrd didn't exist in the U.S. Senate from West Virginia.
No, you didn't answer my question. The senior senator in West Virginia does not use the desk of Robert Byrd.
But Robert Byrd was an ex-Cyclops of the KKK?
Yes, but I'm asking
and he was
you
a
again,
Democrat.
the senior senator right now in Mississippi, it was actually passed by the U.S. Senate, which is a joke. That person uses the desk of Jefferson Davis.
Yeah, I mean.
You cool with that too?
That doesn't bother me. Those are certain things, it just doesn't bother me.
Okay.
What does bother you?
Well, it's a lot. we can talk about it, but those things don't.
Okay.
Those things.
I see now why Mississippi still has fundamental issues when it comes.
Because we have great people who are from there.
No, actually, I see why you still have issues when it comes to economic.
Well, I haven't lived there in about
politics.
18 years,
Yeah,
so
that's probably the reason why you left. All right,
It is.
Yeah, it's the whole reason why you left. Folks, black women are playing a huge role when it comes to turning out the vote. We have known this for quite some time, but only mainstream media has realized that black women actually are getting out to vote. Okay, black people in black media, we've always known that, of course, but you're also seeing black women who are now running for office, even though they're not getting the support they also need. So a new study has been dealing with that whole issue in terms of where black women stand when it comes to voting. So joining us right now is Dr. Andre Perez of the Brookings Institution. They've been looking at this. And Dr. Perez, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Good seeing you, sir. And so when you look at what is happening across this country, you got black women who are not waiting, who are not hoping some political party or some candidate come in with resources. Folks have been on the ground pushing and working hard for quite some time to turn out black women who also hate the Republican Party more than any other group in America.
That's right. So Brookings Institution and the Higher Heights Leadership Fund decided to create a roadmap and looking at the conditions that are ripe for black women electoral success. And what we found is something that we've intuitively known, that black women in majority black places have a higher chance of getting elected. But what we're seeing over the last couple of years, that black women are winning in majority places of color. as opposed to black places, expanding the range of options they have. So London Breed, for instance, San Francisco, should not be considered a surprise in a lot of places. You mentioned Ayanna Presley. She is not a surprise. And then we also found that majority blacks or places where there's a high concentration of black folks, states with a high concentration of black folks, there's a better likelihood of winning. So even in places like Mississippi, women are standing up and their batting average is not that bad. The issue is not necessarily getting out the vote per se, but getting people to run. You know, of all the open seats this year, only a third were contested by black women. In black districts, majority black districts.
You also, of course, have Jahana Hayes, who's in Connecticut, who's also running, could be the first person of color from Connecticut. Then, of course, you also have a sister who's running in Iowa as well. And so what you are seeing these black women run, but also I think a huge part, first of all, you have Democratic constituencies that have not been supporting them.
That's right.
And so what is also being created, you're seeing these black women networks that are also utilizing their buying power and their money to fund a lot of these races as well. We
had a group of elected officials and support groups come to the Brookings Institution when we released this report. And Catherine Pugh, mayor of Baltimore, she flashed a Delta sign signifying that she utilized her social networks to get elected. Black women are not getting the financial backing as their white peers, and they're not getting the backing from the Democratic Party. And we don't have to necessarily mention the Republican Party, which has been absent. But they are leveraging their social resources, and they're winning in spite of the electoral apparatus. And so it's encouraging in that regard, because if they get a decent amount of support, in what you saw in Alabama late in the game, the Democratic Party coming in and supporting the on-the-ground efforts, and you saw what happened there. If they get the kind of support in 2020 that they well deserve, you might see a different outlook in places like Alabama, Mississippi. You know, Doug Jones could have been a black woman. And that's what people are now starting to see, that we don't necessarily have to work for a white candidate. We can elect black candidates to completely represent.
Malik, your party's got a black women problem.
Well,
I mean, they really,
oh, absolutely.
They really hate your. No, and this ain't my opinion. I'm sitting in a meeting with Reince Priebus and top officials there, and a black Republican woman who was sitting there. She said, "Black women hate us more than anybody else. There's no other group in America that hates the Republican Party more than a black woman."
Well, I mean, the Republican Party does have a problem just generally with blacks. I don't know what our percentages
but black
are.
women hate y'all.
Well,
no, bro, I'm talking about the number is, look, 94% of black women went for Hillary Clinton.
Well,
and it wasn't just because of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
They hate y'all.
Yeah, but that's part of that is conditioning. Part of that is just the culture.
But part of it is policy.
I agree. Part of that is policy.
A lot of it is policy.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily. Some of it probably
90% of it is policy.
I would probably say about
black women
60.
are clearly powerful, but they're not protected. You know, at the same time they created the mantra Black Lives Matter, black women have the highest maternal mortality rate in the industrialized world because of largely Republican-backed economic policy, healthcare policy, education. I mean, and so all of these things, if it's not a stretch, when you're not supporting a minimum wage, I mean, New York Times has released a sobering report about the number of children who are homeless going to school, and it's largely because of housing policies and income policies.
But Republican policies, because Trump has only been in office for what? 2 years now.
I would never blame Trump.
But I'm just saying. But prior to him, Obama was in office.
That whole thing of calling Maxine Waters low IQ, that kind of plays badly with black women, don't you think? I mean, that's kind of a problem.
That don't help. Then, of course, when you have chief of staff Megyn Kelly come out and lie on Congresswoman Frederica Wilson.
Street artists
straight up
doing
lie.
billboards.
Don't even offer her an apology. Oh, you remember that one? When Megyn Kelly came out to the podium and then chastised her, saying she did not stand up and support federal agents in Florida, even though she kind of she was the one who made it possible to have the building renamed. And he basically called her out. It was a flat out lie, and he didn't even have the guts to apologize to her. That don't sit well with black women.
I imagine.
But to your credit, I would say that the Democratic Party, by and large, particularly the liberal side of the party, have also supported policies that have not behooved black women well. And at some point, and this is why black women are starting to run, because they're starting to say, hey, neither party is representing me. And so I have to run. And that's why you're also seeing a number of PACs that are starting to emerge. And so the Democratic apparatus is not sufficient for black women. And so, yes, it's not just Republican policies, but clearly they have not supported the things that black folk have represented, from welfare reform, the prison industrial complex, to a number of issues that went against black women's interests.
Yeah, but I don't believe that constitutes the 90+% that we generally vote. I mean,
actually, it does.
I think what are we now, like the largest political voting bloc
but you would
in history?
Count that to conditioning?
No. But no, I said part of that.
Part of it,
yeah. I said part of that.
No.
I said part of it is conditioning.
No. But also, see, here's the mistake.
Conditioned for what exactly?
Here's the
we
mistake.
can't figure out the issues like anybody. What do you mean when you say conditioning? That says to me we're too stupid to figure out that
it doesn't mean
one
that
party is not good for us and the other is.
It means that if you are a Republican,
they don't have the agency to figure out what's going on.
And you grew up in a Republican family in a rural part of West
Like if you
Virginia,
grew up in Mississippi and you don't know that the battle flag is on the flag, like that conditioning.
Well, I grew up a Democrat, so I don't know what point you're trying to make.
Let's talk about
and here in Washington D.C.
the battle flag has
it seems as if what you're trying to do is question my wokeness.
Damn right
but I can walk in Condon Terrace because I live in Ward 8 and I've been in Ward 8 all of this time. I can walk from Condon Terrace to Chopper City at any time of the day. So whatever wokeness it is that you're questioning right here, we can try it again. If you are a Republican growing up in a Republican family in rural West Virginia, Kentucky, Iowa, or any of those places, chances are that when you register to vote, you're going to register as a Republican.
It's not conditioning that black women are voting a certain way.
Well, I said part of it, and I've actually said part of it. That's what you heard. That's what you heard because that's selective hearing. That's what you wanted to hear. But what I said is,
I know exactly
what I said is that the black. I said it's conditioning. I said part of it is conditioning. Part of it actually is policy.
But
I would say most of it's policy.
Okay, well, you would say that, and I would disagree.
And
I would disagree.
Andre, go ahead.
But I would disagree, though.
But black people have not voted for Democrats or Republicans who have laid out generally a conservative agenda that was not of their interest. You know, so it's not. I've spent a large part of my career in Louisiana. Lots of black people did not vote for Democrats because they did not represent their interests.
Precisely.
What I'm saying is a lot of Republicans, black Republicans, don't vote for white Republicans because they don't represent their interests. There's nothing wrong with being conservative. Nothing wrong with being a Republican.
Said there was.
But you better have policies.
Yes.
Oh, I agree with
that can respond to your constituents.
And all I'm saying is, if you Republican, y'all got a black women problem.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're gonna be after your ass in 2020. I'm just letting you know. Dr. Andre Perez, we appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much. Folks, today on the Today Show, Megyn Kelly got into some hot water. Matter of fact, you know what? Don't worry about it. Leave Andre there. He ain't got nowhere to go. He can live there. He can be on the panel. So Megyn Kelly got some hot water today. They were talking about Halloween costumes, and she said this.
You still be able to dress like a moron.
But what is racist? Because truly, you do get in trouble if you are a white person who puts on blackface for Halloween, or a black person who puts on whiteface for Halloween. Like back when I was a kid, that was okay as long as you were dressing up as like a character.
If somebody feels like something is offensive to them, then you should say it, and that's fair game. And you should be able to take it if you're going to dress up like that.
Yeah, you got to be able to take it.
Yeah. One of the things they mentioned is people dressing up like Nazis and this. If you think it's offensive, it probably is.
Yep.
And one of my big complaints just about society right now is whatever happened, and I know how you were raised. I don't know how you were raised, but
no, that's questionable.
Yeah. Whatever happened to just manners and polite society.
But on Halloween, you've got guys running around with fake axes coming out of their head.
But what I'm saying
it's gonna be jarring.
Right, but what I'm saying is, in polite society, someone who's raised it would not think that dressing as a Nazi is okay.
Yeah.
I don't need the PC.
Or painting somebody. I mean, I think that there are limits to how far you want to go.
But
Because you're making people feel bad.
But I'm saying normal people kind of know where that line is.
Yes, right.
I mean, I have a son that dressed as a fireman with an axe and then insisted on carrying the axe around for like a week.
But there was controversy on the Real Housewives. There was a controversy on the Real Housewives of New York with Luann, as she dressed as Diana Ross. And she made her skin look darker than it really is, and people said that was racist. And I don't know, I thought, like, who doesn't love Diana Ross? She wants to look like Diana Ross for one day. I don't know how, like, that got racist on Halloween.
It's not like she's walking around in general. I have not seen it, but it sounds a little racist to me.
Me too.
And by the way, I haven't seen the other, but if she really wanted to look like Diana Ross, she should have dressed as Michael Jackson. Because they...
I don't know. I can't keep up with the number of people that...
just come on, we're already in the deep end.
Literally. I can't keep up with the number of people that were offending just by being, like, normal people.
Well, there was a little problem there. First of all, that's what happens when you have no black people sitting at the table. Plus, it's a little hard when you replace two black people with Megyn Kelly and Tamron Hall and Al Roker. That conversation likely would have went a little different. She got lit up on social media, and just a couple hours ago, she released this. Henry, go to my iPad. Dear friends and teammates, one of the wonderful things about my job is that I get the chance to express and hear a lot of opinions. Today is one of those days where listening carefully to other points of view, including from friends and colleagues, is leading me to rethink my own views. When we had the roundtable discussion earlier today about the controversy of making your face look like a different race as part of a Halloween costume, I suggested if this seemed okay if done as part of this holiday where people have a chance to make themselves look like others. The iconic Diana Ross came up as an example. To me, I thought, why would it be controversial for someone dressing up as Diana Ross to make herself look like this amazing woman as a way of honoring and respecting her? I realize now that such behavior is indeed wrong, and I am sorry. The history of blackface in our culture is abhorrent, the wounds too deep. I've never been a PC kind of person, but I understand that we do need to be more sensitive in this day and age, particularly on race and ethnicity issues, which, far from being healed, have been exacerbated in our politics over the past year. This is a time for more understanding, love, sensitivity, and honor, and I want to be part of that. I look forward to continuing that discussion. I'm honored to work with all of you every day. Love, MK. And also, while we were sitting here, of course, a little bit earlier, I got a phone call and text message from one of the producers of the show, so I'll be chatting with him after this show. But the thing is here. How do you, like, what?
Like, where have you been?
What?
Like, where have you been?
Where all have you been?
How did you not know?
Well, I don't know how every Halloween there's all these, people are in blackface. White people just decide they think that they're doing. You don't need to be Diana Ross. Just be Celine Dion. And so you don't need to be dressed in blackface.
You don't need to Diana Ross without wearing black.
Right, you can be Diana Ross without.
It's ridiculous.
Look,
You have to change your skin color.
Black men dress up like Santa Claus, and we ain't put no damn white makeup on our face.
But Megyn Kelly needs to know her history too. I mean, so first of all, she has her own history of racism throughout her time at Fox.
By saying Santa is white?
Santa, yes, right.
And for NBC to bring her on and normalize this sort of behavior is
But you're on to something that Halloween has become the opportunity for racists to express their racism and say, oh, it's just a costume. I have nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with my attitudes, when in fact it is just another form of intimidation, of letting people know that you're beneath a white standard. And on college campuses in particular, you see a heightening of this. And so
all the ghetto parties and all
the thug parties and all of this other stuff. And so it's just an opportunity for white folks to say, oh, let's break free from our PC culture and let's just be ourselves. And what they're really revealing is their racism.
Well, I think sometimes it's valid where we're talking about a PC culture. Here, and what Megyn's talking about here, I don't even know where she's I don't know where she's been. I don't know what she's listening to not even know that blackface is something that's offensive. And as you said, why would you even have to paint your face anything darker than what it is other than trying to give yourself a tan?
I mean, Lauren,
and that's a bad tan right
Zoe
there.
Saldana called hell. Darkening her features to play Nina Simone. A black woman. A black woman caught hell. Darkening her skin.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm just going to give a shout out to Jacob Soboroff, who was out there and said, "I haven't seen it, but it seems pretty racist to me." And then Jenna Bush goes, "Yeah, me too."
I'm just saying.
It was like, what is going on here? But again, Tamron Hall should be sitting there, and we all know it. That's what I think about when I see this moment.
Right.
Tamron Hall is the one that should be sitting there.
Well, I'll tell you this here, when you talk about this idea of how people perceive what is racist. Last night, of course, the Orange One had a rally in my hometown of Houston for Ted Cruz, where he said, hey, it's cool to be a nationalist. Press play.
You know, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist. Nationalist. Nothing wrong. Use that word. Use that word.
It's old-fashioned, all right. It's definitely old-fashioned. That part's accurate. Unbelievable. 14 days. 14 days.
You cool with, are you a nationalist?
I'm a patriot just like Trump.
No. He didn't say patriot. He didn't say patriot. He said,
just like
no, that
Trump.
ain't what he said.
That's what he meant.
No. Now y'all go interpreting. He said, no, use it.
That's
he said,
what he
they
meant.
told me not to use it.
Right.
He said, I'm a nationalist.
I'm going to use it anyway.
Are you a nationalist?
I'm a patriot just like Trump.
So you're not a nationalist?
I am. If that means what a patriot means, then I'm all for it.
You know damn well.
I'm pretty sure that's what Trump meant. I'm pretty sure that's what Trump meant.
So why did he say patriot?
Well, because I think we know that Donald Trump is provocative. We know that he tries to push back against anything that's orthodox. And I think that's an example of what we're seeing there.
White nationalists are orthodox?
Well, he didn't say white nationalist. He said nationalism.
But he white.
But if you talk about, if we get to the definition of nationalism.
But you black. Are you a nationalist?
I'm a patriot. I'm an absolute
See, you won't answer that damn question. See, it's amazing, Andre, how you won't answer the question because he knows exactly what the hell nationalist means.
But if you're going to be a patriot like Donald Trump and signal a white nationalist word and then harbor all of the segregationists, the racists, the bigots in the Republican Party, then what kind of patriot are you?
Well, Donald Trump has rejected that.
No, he hasn't.
Donald Trump has rejected.
No, he hasn't.
When has he not rejected racism and bigotry? When has he not done that?
Hell, he still
2 days after Charlottesville, he
President
condemned
Douglas
it.
living at his house in D.C.
But you do not. What I'm saying is, you do not see an exodus of racists from the Republican Party.
And
they're getting shelter from.
And in
fact,
he keeps hiring Republican racists who it's like okay, well, another one. Oh yeah, we got to try to force this one out.
Right.
Wait a minute, what racist has he hired?
Bro, are you serious?
Which racist has
Have you heard of Steve Bannon?
Steve Bannon.
Hold up, stop. Did Steve Bannon not say that Breitbart was the home of the alt-right?
He did say
white
that.
supremacists?
He did say that.
Did he hire Stephen Miller?
You could say.
Wait, hold on, I ain't done. Did he hire Stephen Miller?
He did.
Who Richard Spencer said was my role model? Richard Spencer, the white nationalist, said Stephen Miller. He said Stephen Miller was my role model at Duke. Did they not fire a speechwriter for Donald Trump who sat next to a white nationalist at a conference? Did they not have to fire somebody in HUD who had racist writings?
Well, did
they not have to?
They may have.
Do you need me to keep going?
They may have. These type of things happen in every administration.
All right, Nick, go ahead. Because I'm going roll call on your ass today. Between voter suppression and the Trump administration.
We've seen incidents that maybe.
It ain't going well for you today with roll call. Nick, go ahead.
No, there's example after example after example. And the thing that scares me, I have young children at school. Yeah. Donald Trump is being used as a racial, to call people names. You know, they hide, white people, white racists hide behind the MAGA hats. They say Donald Trump. as a form of saying white power in place of things like white power. And he sort of doesn't, he doesn't do anything to disavow it. In fact, he's doubling down on it. Everyone knows what he's talking about there. And then the chants then that follow and people cheering USA, right. USA are just, it is, you know it when you see it, you know.
Just like the Republican congressman who stood on the floor of the United States House to tell Maxine Waters that can we just stop focusing on discrimination and be one country when the Republicans were voting to actually overturn an Obama law that hit folks who were discriminating against black people in the buying of cars. Republicans actually passed that, getting rid of provisions to stop discrimination because they say we one country. And she said, I won't yield my time. But speaking of also, again, Republicans being aided by racism, this robocall went out across Florida against Andrew Gillum.
Well, hello there. I is the Negro Andrew Gillum, and I'll be asking you to make me governor of this here state of Florida. My esteemed opponent, who doesn't call me monkey, is doing a lot of hollering about how expensive my plans for health care be. But he be thinking of the white man's medicine, which is very expensive because it uses science and whatnot. But the medicine of my African race be very affordable. For instance, putting the chicken feet under your pillow during the full moon don't cost hardly nothing at all. So I promise that you make me Andrew Gillum, the governor, every people that be ailing will get all.
That's the second racist robocall that white racists have unleashed against Andrew Gillum in Florida in support of Ron DeSantis, his opponent.
That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
It's the best black GOTV you could ever have. Watch the results in 14 days.
Yeah. But they're leaning on it.
Keep running on it.
But go ahead. They are leaning on this approach to win, because you can win by defaming black people. Well, and that is a harsh reality. That's why you're seeing so much talk about the new caravan and pitting Americans against Latino brethren. You know, it's just
win, but name a recent race. I mean, because Gillespie went down in flames.
Absolutely.
Okay, on a totally Trump. I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
Historically,
of course, the racist running for U.S. Senator right now. Who's the racist running for U.S. Senator in Virginia right now?
Corey Stewart.
And he's going to go down in flames.
But remember the ad that was actually run against, I think it was the Latino PAC or something, the ad that was run against, was it Gillespie?
Right.
Or was it
the
one with the guy was running around talking about he was going to round up.
And the Democrats pulled the ad.
That was something that the Democrats actually did. So I think that both
you see, the MS-13 ads that Mr. Gillespie ran against Ralph Northam were a hell of a lot rougher than that ad.
About the MS-13 ads,
a hell of a lot rougher than ad after ad. You don't know anything about that.
But I do know that the ads that I'm talking about.
So wait now.
But we also know this.
The point was that was a race-baiting race.
We also know this.
And the race-baiting lost.
The most racist campaigning in America right now is Duncan Hunter in California.
Oh, yeah.
What he has been literally calling his Democratic opponent, who's a Muslim, you vote for him, you are electing a terrorist. Yeah. He is, and guess what? And your party has not disavowed Duncan Hunter.
I can't speak for my party on that one.
Well, it is the most racist campaign. No, he has been literally out of his mouth. Not racist unleashing a robocall. No, this has been coming out of Duncan Hunter's mouth. Duncan Hunter, the same one, of course, who got indicted. Him and his wife.
And it should be
Nick, final comment before I gotta go.
I mean, it's just, to your point, I'm actually speechless. It is unbelievable. I mean, throughout this entire hour, I mean, it's just example after example after example of the pattern and practice by the Republican Party to both suppress voters and to race bait. And that, to me, is what they think is a winning strategy. Let's see what happens in
And what does it tell you? If racists are that comfortable in one party, there must be something attractive. I'm just saying. Folks, be sure to support Roland Martin Unfiltered by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Your donations make this possible. We're trying to get 20,000 of our followers to contribute at least $50 for the whole year to help fund what we are doing. Tomorrow, right here on the show, we will be back. We'll talk about a former CIA whistleblower, of course, who's been calling out wrongdoing. Of course, he's heading to prison on some other stuff, but he was putting on blast wrongdoing taking place. And, of course, Niecy Nash got something to say, talking to all these white women who keep calling the cops on black people, y'all got to see this video as well. So look forward to having that. Plus, we will have video from the Stacey Abrams, Brian Kemp debate happening right now in Georgia. If you go to RolandSMartin.com and RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, we'll actually have that debate on our websites as well. Thank you, our panel. I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. And folks, thanks all of you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Holla!